Imagine being so addicted to a game that you spent a full 10 years just to reach the final boss room, and now when you finally get there, you discover that it was all just a test to determine whether you are worthy of stepping into this world or not. What's more, you become the barbarian character you chose to complete the game. This is the story of our MC, a guy who was always weak, spent a lot of time in the hospital, and was addicted to gaming just like me. However, he grew frustrated because good games weren't being released like they used to be. Finally, he found a forum discussing a new game. The game was said to be very different from others, requiring 100% effort from the player. The game's name was Dungeons & Stone, an indie RPG with 2D graphics. At first, our boy didn't find the game exciting because it was available only in English, but since it was free, he decided to give it a try. When it was time to select a character, there were several options: human, dwarf, elf, barbarian, and furry. There was also a mysterious option with 3 question marks, which seemed to be a random or secret character. He randomly selected the barbarian, thinking he wouldn't play the game for long. Initially, the game didn't seem impressive to him, but within minutes, he was completely hooked, losing track of time. The game featured unique classes and mechanics. Some were highly useful, while others were completely useless. You had to form alliances with NPCs, and if you died, you had to start all over again. At first, this mechanic felt exciting, but as he kept dying repeatedly, he grew frustrated. Despite this, he refused to give up. He played the game in the hospital. Then, during his time as a civil servant, through college, and even while working a job, through it all, he never stopped playing Dungeons & Stone. But despite his persistence, he kept dying again and again. 9 long years passed like this, and now he had finally reached the final boss room. After reaching the Abyss Gate, he breathed a sigh of relief and even celebrated, thinking that no one else could have dedicated 9 years to this game like he did. Now, the biggest question was whether to enter the boss room or not. When he selected yes, the game warned him that he might not be able to return and asked if he was sure. The warning felt almost as if the game itself was cautioning him, but the protagonist didn't care and confirmed his decision. As soon as he selected yes, the game began loading, and he started imagining what the final boss might be like. Then the game revealed something shocking. It told him that reaching the Abyss Gate only marked the completion of the tutorial. The protagonist was stunned. How could the game consider this a tutorial? His frustration grew even more as the game text suddenly changed to Korean. Angry, he thought about all the time he had wasted. At that moment, the game confirmed his target, and strange light began emanating from his monitor. The light engulfed him completely, and he felt a sharp pain as his body was pulled in. His consciousness started fading, and in the distance he heard a voice. The voice grew louder and louder, congratulating young warriors for stepping into a sacred realm to become true warriors. When he opened his eyes, he realized that everything had changed. Wherever he looked, there were torches, and around him stood strong, muscular barbarians. His own body felt completely different, fit, covered in hard muscles and tattoos. Above all, an old-ass jacked geezer was shouting, asking everyone to pick their weapons. That's when he realized he had become the very barbarian character he had selected in the game. The old man continued calling warriors forward to pick their armaments. The first one was Karok, the third son of Vannon, who chose a double-headed axe. As soon as he selected his weapon, it was announced that he had become a warrior. Then another warrior was called forward. One by one, everyone started choosing their weapons. The old man blessed them, saying, "May the grace of Raphonia be with you, young warriors." At that moment, the protagonist finally understood that he was truly inside the world of Dungeons & Stone. Not only had he become a barbarian, but he was also now living as the character he had chosen. As he tried to process what had happened, someone nearby muttered, "This can't be real." A terrified barbarian standing next to him said aloud that they were all inside the Dungeons & Stone game. Hearing this, the protagonist realized he wasn't the only one trapped in this strange world. Suddenly, the old barbarian shouted, "Who spoke? Was it you?" The protagonist, shocked, screamed that it wasn't him, and angrily glared at the person who had actually spoken. The old man stared at the person and said, "It was you, wasn't it?" The barbarian quickly asked, "Are we really inside Dungeons & Stone?" Without hesitation, the old man walked straight up to him and decapitated him. The old man then shouted, "Kadua's son, Orm was possessed by an evil spirit." He ordered the rest of the barbarians to erase everything the evil spirit had said from their minds and continue with the ceremony. The protagonist suddenly understood 3 critical pieces of information. First, people like him who had entered this game world were seen as evil spirits. Second, if anyone found out about his true nature, he would be killed. Third, if he had spoken earlier, his own head would now be lying on the ground. The old man then called for the 4th son of Senek to step forward. Seeing this situation, the protagonist grew increasingly anxious as people were being called one by one. Worse, those like him were being summoned as well. He devised a plan. If no one stepped forward within 2 seconds of their name being called, he would go instead. Soon, a name was announced. Bjorn, son of Jandel. The protagonist counted 1, 2. When no one came forward, he decided to step out. It was then revealed that his name was Bjorn, the son of Jandel. As the protagonist stepped forward, he noticed the old man glaring at him. The old man instructed him to choose any weapon he liked. There were several options to pick from. The weapon chosen by the protagonist caught the old man's attention. It was a shield. The protagonist believed the shield was the best option. Meanwhile, outside the game, the computer automatically updated with a notification. Object's overall level increased by +24, and this information was sent to the administrator. We were also shown the protagonist status. When he had initially chosen the barbarian class, he had picked a sword because it looked powerful. However, there was a major problem. He kept dying repeatedly, just like a noob. Even monsters seemed confused by how often he died. He tried two-handed axes, maces, hammers, everything, but the results were always the same. He would enter berserk mode and die again. One day, while wandering through a town, he came across a shield. It was different. He then realized that the barbarian class had high vitality, which made it perfect for tanking. Initially, learning how to use the shield was challenging because it took time to master the skills associated with it. But later, when he began defeating stronger monsters, he became almost invincible. In fact, the barbarian class turned out to be completely overpowered, which is why he chose the shield. With the ceremony complete, the gates to the labyrinth opened. The town housing the labyrinth was called Rafdonia. On the leader's orders, everyone rushed inside. They were all moving together, but had no idea where they were going. Suddenly, the person leading them turned around and admitted, "I've forgotten the way." Angered, everyone forced him to resign from his temporary leader position. Next, Einar, the second daughter of Fenelon, took the lead. The protagonist observed the situation quietly. A moment later, Einar announced that she too had forgotten the way. She looked dejected, and the protagonist realized this couldn't continue. However, he also couldn't afford to stand out too much. He pulled her aside and pointed toward a group that seemed to be heading toward the labyrinth. He suggested they follow that group. Einar understood his point and quickly informed everyone that she now knew the way. Shortly after, they found the labyrinth entrance. The protagonist began to wonder whether entering was the right decision. He considered leaving the barbarian group entirely. His life in the other world had been spent sick in bed. He had never fought before. Could he really defeat monsters here? At the very least, he needed to pay the game's taxes. In Dungeons & Stone, taxes were mandatory after the age of 20. Those who didn't pay were literally killed. There were two ways to earn money: enter the labyrinth to fight monsters, or take humble jobs in bars or markets. But there was a problem. As a barbarian, his reputation was that of a wild and destructive individual. This was due to the game setting. On the upside, barbarians were given weapons from the start. The downside was that the labyrinth only opened once a month, and there were just 10 minutes left before it closed. The protagonist was still stuck in his dilemma. Suddenly, Einar grabbed his hand and pulled him forward, urging him to hurry. The portal was shrinking. He told her to go ahead, assuring her that he would follow. Before leaving, she thanked him. He said there was no need, but she insisted she wanted to learn how to be as smart as him. She had never seen such an intelligent barbarian and aspired to be like him. He thought to himself that she would have to be reborn in another class to achieve that, as barbarians were inherently foolish. Not wanting to hurt her feelings, he simply said, "Just think and act like a normal person." She happily thanked him again and promised to reward him if he returned alive from the labyrinth. He wondered what kind of reward she would give and wondered whether something might develop between them. However, what stuck with him was the phrase, "if you return alive." Barbarians in this game were not afraid of death. They didn't care about it. The protagonist asked her, "Are you afraid of dying?" Einar ponders for a while and asks, "Isn't it obvious?" Yes, she is afraid, but she is a born warrior. If you don't know how to fight, you're not a barbarian. This realization makes it clear to her that she has to enter the labyrinth. So be it. Being a barbarian, she has learned to conquer her fears. Now she moves deeper inside. In the dungeon, visibility is almost zero. When we talk about dungeons and stones, our boy is a veteran. He knows there should be crystals on the walls to at least light some of the way. But here he realizes he's been thrown into sheer darkness. This has never happened before in his 9 years of gaming experience. He proceeds cautiously, feeling the walls as he moves. As he senses that his pace is too slow, he steps into a bear trap. Nearly screaming in pain, he stifles his voice, knowing that an enemy might be nearby. And guess what? Our boy is right. Hidden in the darkness is a small but sinister creature. The worst part, these creatures are cunning and only attack when you're severely weakened. Despite the pain and frustration, he chastises himself for whining. Instead, he shouts, challenging the goblin for a fight. Standing tall, despite his numb leg, which has been trapped, protagonist anger intensifies. He curses the goblin. Just then, he hears the creature's footsteps, confirming that his shouting is working. Our boy pretends to run, baiting the creature. As he walks, it walks, and he stops, it stops. Seeing this, our boy devises a new plan. He collapses entirely, playing dead to fool the goblin. The creature stands at a distance, watching to confirm if his target is truly lifeless. Then it starts throwing stones at him, testing if he's alive. This enrages our boy. He realizes that this goblin might be even smarter than the barbarian who failed to find the labyrinth secrets. As the goblin approaches, our boy makes a critical error. He misses an attack. To make matters worse, the goblin laughs at him, mocking his failure. Protagonist's blood boils. Driven by sheer rage, his body reacts instinctively, attacking the goblin repeatedly. He might have destroyed it completely. That's the true strength of a barbarian. Raw, untamed madness. After defeating the goblin, Our boy gains experience points, and the creature's body vanishes, leaving behind a small crystal, the game's currency. This 9th grade magical gem is worth only as much as a piece of bread. It's now crystal clear. This is a world of dungeons and monsters, a land of familiar landscapes, and various game races. Our boy realizes this is the same game he played for 9 years. But if this is his new reality, he will only find out by dying, dragging himself, leaving trails of blood. Our boy crawls for what seems like 10 miles. At one point, he sees a light at the end of the cave. Just as he's about to give up, he notices a group of people passing. By now, our boy is on the verge of death with only 2% life remaining. Bjorn tries to speak, but his low health prevents him. The group questions how a beginner could have made it this far, as it seems impossible. Bjorn, irritated, feels an urge to punch the helpers. The group leader remains calm and asks someone named Racina to heal the barbarian, but Racina refuses without reason. The leader, expecting this, asks another member to offer a potion. The healer reluctantly agrees, explaining that divine powers might be needed later, but potions could suffice for now. The potion is poured on Bjorn's foot, which regenerates rapidly, but comes with excruciating pain. Bjorn screams in agony, but soon his foot is as good as new. He stands up, though this healing wasn't free. The group now wants information. They questioned, how did a beginner like him end up here? Bjorn honestly admits he doesn't know. He just stumbled into the dungeon. Palladino says this phenomenon only occurs once in 100 years. Bjorn laments his terrible luck. After gathering all the information, the group said that he won't need to pay for the potions because in this labyrinth, time is money. Bjorn finds it odd that these people are investing so much time in him. Still, he feels good about surviving. The group moves in the direction Bjorn came from, following a blood trail. After a while, the potion vendor remarks that barbarian is lucky. The blonde guy agrees, mentioning he endured such trials at the beginning of the game, saying it's not something ordinary. The woman adds that the red-haired guy avoided using potions, and the leader ended up saving protagonist instead. The potion vendor doesn't deny this, but points out that the priest also did the same. The environment becomes tense. While exchanging harsh words, they begin to speculate about how far that barbarian's blood has spread. Archer wonders whether this was truly luck for barbarian. The group continues walking until they finally stop, facing the portal to the labyrinth 2nd floor. Seeing this, the group feels elated. However, as they are about to enter the portal, the woman says stop, and asks if what they see lying there is barbarian's saddle. The old man uses light magic to illuminate the path they had traveled. The blood trail is still visible, shocking everyone. The old man asks the leader how far that barbarian managed to travel. The blonde guy estimates about 10 miles. This realization dawns on the group. If this individual managed to crawl so far alone, he must possess monstrous strength. The red-haired man shivers at the thought, wondering if he could have endured such a pain himself. He recalls seeing barbarian extending his right hand and showing a magic gam. This means that barbarian crawled this far, unsure if he'd survive, yet never let go of his bargaining tool as he desperately clung to life. The red-haired immediately retracts his earlier statements and even asks his teammates if they remember Barbarian's name. Until now, everyone had assumed barbarians are a mindless race, bent on slaughter. But this individual seems different. Switching back to our boy, he fights goblins, defeating them using only his shield and fists. He learns their patterns and tackles traps scattered along the way. When goblins attack from behind, he turns and beats them with a shield. However, he faces one problem: hunger. The tribe leader had given him a bag of food, but it tore apart, leaving him with only 2 out of 7 pieces of bread. Realizing he must ration carefully, he eats a bit of bread, remarking how delicious it is. But now he is thirsty, wondering where he might find water in this dungeon. He reflects on how the game didn't require drinking water. Now in this real-life scenario, the challenge feels much harder. Bjorn, frustrated, gets up to search for water. Eventually, he hears the sound of running water and spots someone drinking in a corner. As Bjorn approaches, the person leaves immediately. He then took a seat and started counting his crystals, finding he had about 40. But now a new problem arises: fatigue. He knows he needs sleep. In the dungeon, there are 2 ways to sleep. The first is simply to lie down and leave your fate to God. The second method is a bit more effective. Choose a sleeping partner. But the protagonist didn't expect that everyone would turn him down, which made him pissed off. Though he gets angry at almost anything, suddenly someone calls out to him. It's a guy who is smiling, and his name is Han. He asks if the protagonist is really looking for a sleeping partner, and explains that it's just for taking care of each other while sleeping. Bjorn quickly agrees and introduces himself, but the guy shakes his hand in a romantic manner and says, "It would have been better if there were 3 of us." Then blushing, he asks, "Are we really just the 2 of us, bro? I don't like this guy's intentions." The protagonist feels like smashing his head in, but he holds himself back because he needs some nighttime company. The 2 play rock, paper, scissors, and Han wins, so he'll sleep first. As usual, our boy gets pissed off. This time, due to his bad luck, Han says, "Here, take this watch. When the pointer reaches here, wake me up. Then Han falls asleep. Bjorn sat there thinking whether he should ask to borrow Han's sleeping bag. He also hopes no goblin will come. Time passes and finally he wakes Han up. Han thanks him for doing a good job and says it's now his turn to sleep for 2 hours. But obviously the Bjorn won't be able to sleep. How can he trust an unknown guy? So our boy pretends to snore as if he's asleep. He wonders if Han is going to betray him to appear clueless. He turns his back to him and just waits to see when Han will attack. But Han does nothing. 2 hours pass and now it's Bjorn's turn to stand guard. Not a single moment of sleep for him. He starts losing his sanity, wondering why Han hasn't done anything. Then he thinks he should have trusted him a little, and slowly he begins to fall asleep. Suddenly, he wakes up with a loud scream, and both of them just stare at each other. Bjorn explained, "I didn't even realize when I fell asleep." Han replies, "First, clean your mouth." Lucky for us, no one attacked while we were sleeping. Bjorn apologizes and tells him that if he wants to sleep more, he can and he'll watch. But Han happily says, "No need. You can sleep now. I'll keep watch." Bjorn thanked him. Han stays with his trademark smile the whole time. Bjorn offers him a real-life deal and doesn't blame him for falling asleep. He refuses to switch shifts when the mistake was his. Our boy knows that people like Han don't exist in the Dungeons and Stone game. As soon Bjorn opens his eyes, Han asks if he is awake, and holding a giant hammer over our boy's face asks him wants to sleep a little more. But at that moment, if Bjorn hadn't dodged, he would have been crushed right there. He quickly jumps to the side, and the guy can't believe that he dodged. It seems like he triggered the anger of someone whose mind wasn't all there. Bjorn attacks him with full hatred, and the guy shouted at him to stop. Our boy strikes him with a shield, cracking his head open. Han repeatedly says to stop, claiming he can explain, but in Bjorn's mind, this guy is like a goblin who wouldn't fall with just one hit, so he strikes him again. The guy falls 2 meters away and begins to crawl. Han keeps apologizing, but Bjorn just wants to know why he did it. Han reveals that he was planning to knock him out and steal his magic stone. He then talks about taking the shield and other equipment because he could sell it for a good sum. Our boy asks, "Is that all?" The guy replies, "Yes. Now let me go." Bjorn doesn't think this will happen. This is the last chance he's given the guy to tell the truth. Fearfully, the guy admits that he wanted a heart. Our boy is confused and doesn't understand. But the guy explains that the barbarian's heart sells for a lot of money and seems to be used as raw material for magical items. In simple words, our boy was nothing more than a goblin to him. If the guy had killed him, it would have benefited him. But now the Bjorn wants to know why he acted now and not when he was asleep. The reason is that the guy also needed to sleep. He says, "Now that I've told you everything, will you let me go?" Bjorn knows that more people like him will come. So, will he keep letting them go? Han says that he's not like the others, but our boy just picks up his shield. This is the first person he has killed with his own hands. He hasn't even been in this new world for a day, and already he's taken a life. With that, our boy equips shoulder pads, increasing his item level to 13. He then equips a backpack, increasing his inventory space, and a hammer, which raises his item level to 30. He also puts on boots. This means he's equipped with all of Han's gear. I've already mentioned that Han was a true friend. He gave our boy some cool items. Let's thank him. Thank you, Han. You're a true friend. Because of him, our boy has stepped out of his primitive life. Now he has water, medicine, and even a watch to check the time. Here's the current state of our boy. He's now wreaking havoc on goblins, and the big hammer is really coming in handy. The next day, goblins start appearing in groups that he can handle. But there's a problem. They aren't the goblins. He easily takes care of them. The problem now is sleep. He leans against a wall to relax. But at that moment, the goblins arrive, thinking he's asleep. This makes him furious. He says he doesn't even get 10 minutes of rest and crushes them all. After clearing everyone out, he says, "Now I'll take a nap." But suddenly, a large goblin is stabbing a knife into his chest. He wakes up with a jolt, slaps the goblin away, and sends him flying. Another goblin, seeing his friend flying about 69 kilometers per hour, notices that the barbarian is angry and quickly runs away. Our boy thought he would wake up gradually, but now he has to heal his wounds. While healing, our boy muttered that potion stabs hurt more than the wounds themselves. It's been 14 hours since Bjorn killed Han, and now he's thinking of finding a new nighttime companion. However, unlike the previous day, everyone now wants him on their team, probably because he looks a little cleaner, who knows. But anyone who passes by invites him. However, today he himself declines and says that he will stay with his own race, meaning with the barbarians. As he walks through the dungeon, he notices an elf girl sitting in a corner. Obviously, she notices him and gets scared. He immediately asks her if she is hurt, which makes her more alert. When he looks at her closely, he realizes he didn't notice it earlier. He asks her if humans injured her. As he gets closer, the elf kneels and starts apologizing. Bjorn is completely confused, and she keeps saying that she just wants to be forgiven just this once because she needs to take care of her little brother. This makes our boy even more confused, because it's not normal for an elf to behave like this. Elves in the game are usually very cold, but still, he smiles and says, "Don't be afraid, my dear elf. I have no intention of killing you." The elf is shocked, and keeps saying that she knows he is a barbarian, but is he really going to do it? Can he really let her go this time? Now, our boy starts getting angry and asks why she is so scared. Then he gives her some items for healing and says that they will talk later. These items are healing leaves that barbarians give to their old companions. She asks her if he needs a reason for help. He says, "Do I need a reason to protect you? Take care of your wounds." Obviously, he has a reason to help her because he also needs a nighttime companion. And honestly, the wound looks pretty huge. It seems like he has never seen such a huge, if you know what I mean. But despite being so badly injured and without sleep, her appearance is still decent. This makes it even harder for her to find a nighttime companion compared to him. They introduce each other, and we learn that the elf's name is Erwin. Now, our boy wants to know why she is so scared of him. She says it's because she is an elf and he is a barbarian. She explains that barbarians are their mortal enemies. But this is different from the game where it wasn't mentioned. Soon, she regrets and says that actually the war ended 10 years ago and she doesn't have any issues with barbarians. In short, she just doesn't want to fight. Up until now, our boy thought he knew everything about this world, but now he realizes that this world is different from the game and there is a lot he doesn't know about it. Hearing this, he becomes a little worried. But the elf girl is happy when our hero says that it doesn't matter to him either. But actually, he wants her to be his nighttime companion. He is very tired, and maybe she is too. So why not cooperate? She thinks about it and remembers that barbarians value their honor above all else. So, she asks him to swear on his warrior's honor that he won't do anything to her. As usual, this makes him a little angry, but he agrees when she says she will swear as well. He swears, "I swear on the honor of my father, whose name he already forgot." Then the elf swears too, and this non-aggression vow is fulfilled between them, at least for the night. He says that he will sleep first as maybe this will make him feel safer. She says she has no problem with it, and this time Bjorn gives him a watch saying that she should take care of it because it's expensive. He lies down and thinks he will pretend to snore and sleep for about 10 minutes to confirm, but suddenly he wakes up in shock because he had actually fallen asleep. He asks how long he has been asleep and she says 2 hours. He thinks it's because of the sleeping bag and blankets. Now he feels obliged to give them to her and she is very happy. Finally, she falls asleep and maybe she was as tired our barbarian. Bjorn feels like weeks have passed in this game, but in reality only 3 days have passed since he arrived here. This makes him wonder what might have happened to his body in the real world. Well, as far as he remembers, his body was pulled into a monitor, but he has no idea. When he checks the watch, he realizes there are only 10 minutes left to wake the sleeping beauty. This makes him worry as he doesn't know what to do with her now. Should he join her and share all the loot from the third day because the game is now sending goblins in groups instead of singles? He says he can handle up to 4 goblins, but the problem is still sleep. Because if he joins her, he will have to divide the loot. But if he doesn't join her, he will have to find another nighttime companion the next day. Suddenly, he sees 2 humans coming toward him. They are already whispering, "Isn't this the elf we've been looking for?" One says, "Yes, this is her." Blondie comes up Bjorn and asks what his relationship with the elf is. He answers that she is his nighttime companion. But when Fatas Blondie asks how long they will be together, Bjorn gets furious and says him to fuck off. This scares the 2 chickens and they run away. Our boy understands they are looking for the elf and realizes it's time to wake her up. When he does, she slightly says, "Just 5 more minutes," and pulls the blanket over herself. But this makes Bjorn realize she was pretending to be asleep because the blanket was loose before, and now she is holding it. Suddenly, our boy pulls her up and sits her like a child. He directly asks her why she was pretending to sleep, and she sadly replies that if she woke up, he would probably leave her, since they only made a deal for the night. Bjorn understands now why she was pretending, because as soon as she opened her eyes, their agreement would end, and she would have to survive alone again. But before that, he asks her what connection she has with the 2 men, and she firmly says that there is no connection. However, Bjorn doesn't understand how they recognized her, and she admits that she might be from the clan that tried to hurt her. At least their clothes had the symbol of the Crystal Union clan. He immediately understands that joining her might be dangerous, because the whole clan is after her. But seeing that she is only 20, he asks her to come with him so they can talk while walking. She asks if he'll help her, and he says he wants to hear the whole story first. Erwin gets excited, and she begins telling her story. She explains that she met the man on the first day of her journey, and he became her nighttime companion. But something felt off, so she opened her eyes and saw that the man had his hand in an odd position near her. He was telling her to sleep a little longer. Later, she found out that he was a manager of a clan that did business on the first floor. She continues that she somehow escaped that day, but his clan members are still chasing her and she got an arrow in her abdomen. Now, our boy wants to know how they are able to track her. She tells him that she thinks they use a message stone to keep tracking her. A message stone is a mystical device that allows communication within a range of about 300 meters once synchronized. It's like a walkie-talkie. Bjorn understands that if he leaves her, she will be captured, but it doesn't seem like she has done anything wrong. He asked her why was there such insistence on chasing her. Was it just to silence her? Hesitantly, she denied it, and with a slight blush, admitted that when she was running away for the first time, she had thrown her knife, and by mistake, it had landed there. She assumed he understood the implication. Rumors said the situation had turned so bad that even potions couldn't fix it. Well, that was more than enough reason for them to come after her. Feeling embarrassed, Erwin softly apologized. Just then, a strange sensation washed over her, and she quickly warned Bjorn not to look back. A group was following them from about 150 meters away. Our boy was impressed by her precision. This was likely an innate passive ability of the elves. Deciding they needed to move faster, he asked if her injury was fine. She assured him it was, though she knew her wounds had reopened. Despite that, she didn't complain. Even as they picked up speed, the distance between them and their pursuers wasn't increasing. Bjorn started formulating a plan. Erwin noticed his thoughtful expression and asked if something was wrong. Instead of answering directly, he asked her what she was good at. Proudly, she declared that she was skilled at washing clothes and cleaning the house, instantly ruining any hope he had for a battle strategy. Frustrated, he clarified that he was asking about combat. She then explained that she was proficient in archery and spiritual fire magic. Bjorn immediately recognized it as one of the rarest elemental abilities. However, what he truly wanted to know was whether she had ever killed someone. She shook her head but confidently stated that she could if necessary. Acknowledging her response, he then asked if she would be willing to accompany him until they escaped the labyrinth. Bjorn stated that the rewards would be divided. He would take 90% and she would 10%. Surprisingly, she accepted the deal. As the enemies closed in, now only 100 meters away, Bjorn realized he needed to change his plan. He decided to take a detour and instructed Erwin to summon her fire spirit. Without hesitation, she did as he asked. Of course, our boy hadn't expected to end up back in this place. This was the very spot where he had first spawned inside the labyrinth. Before he could dwell on it, Erwin warned him that the enemies were getting even closer. At the same time, Bjorn told her to unsummon her fire spirit. Suddenly, darkness engulfed the area. Our boy quickly understood that these people had advanced tracking techniques, even in complete darkness, as one of them had stopped right where they were. Without wasting time, Bjorn called out to the elf and told her to fire an arrow at the enemies. She drew her bow, assuming a graceful archer's stance, her expression cold and focused. With precise aim, she released an arrow that struck her target directly in the head. A thought crossed her mind. This was probably her first kill. Bjorn praised her, saying that if she had hesitated, they might have been in danger. As they approached the fallen body, a voice crackled from a message stone. The transmission was being heard by multiple people, and an immediate order followed. Everyone gather at the Goblin district. It was now clear the person tracking Bjorn and the elf was Siren. Checking through Siren's belongings, our boy found 2 daggers, a bag filled with magic crystals, and a potion attached to his belt. Meanwhile, Erwin had already put on Siren's clothes. Bjorn remarked that she looked much better now. She then taught him how to use the communication stone. It was as simple as pressing the button on its side. Just then, another message came through. Repeat, repeat. Siren is no longer responding. He was tracking the elf, but he has been defeated. She's in the Goblin district, along with the barbarian, wielding a massive hammer. Their bounty is set at 10,000 gold coins. Erwin was already in shock, but Bjorn reassured her, telling her not to worry and to summon her spirit once again. Their next move was clear. They were about to travel through the darkness and head straight for the second floor of the dungeon. After some time, Erwin addressed him as Sir and asked if they were really heading to the second floor. He confirmed it, and she hesitantly inquired if he was aware that it was far more difficult than the first floor. He reassured her, saying he knew and that there wouldn't be any problems because they made a great combination. Hearing this, she felt a little embarrassed. After all, a tank and a long-range damage dealer always formed a strong team. However, she still hesitated to proceed. Just then, an announcement rang out. A voice stated that if they managed to capture the elf, they would be allowed to keep her in exchange for 10,000 gold. Upon hearing this, she quickly agreed and declared that she would go to the second floor with Bjorn. Our boy, of course, hadn't wanted her to hear such things and follow him merely out of fear, but at least this meant he didn't have to convince her. As far as he was concerned, he always liked helping those in need, especially if it meant he could take down some villains along the way. As they continued walking, she suddenly asked if he knew the way. He admitted that he wasn't exactly sure, but if they headed north, they would eventually reach it. He knew this because he had played the game extensively. Just then, Erwin abruptly told him to wait. There was a goblin trap ahead. She assured him she would handle it. Naturally, the goblins took this moment to launch a surprise attack from behind. However, she swiftly dodged the first goblin and shot an arrow straight into its head. The second goblin charged at her, but she was already moving at full speed, swiftly maneuvering behind it and taking it down as well. This girl was incredible. With a cheerful grin, she excitedly asked how she had done. Bjorn praised her, admitting that she was even better than he had expected. Delighted, Erwin handed him some magic crystals, reminding him of their agreement. He would get 9, and she would take 1. Happily, she remarked that if they kept progressing like this, she might actually earn enough to buy a gift for her younger brother. Bjorn, slightly puzzled, simply encouraged her to keep working hard. Suddenly, the message stone rang again, announcing that the reward had now been increased to 20,000 gold coins, dead or alive. As always, Bjorn assured her that no one would be able to pursue them in the darkness. However, before they could relax, a new problem emerged. Standing before them were several ghouls. She turned to him and asked if she should fight them. This time, he firmly stated that they would fight together. In Dungeon & Stone, when someone defeats a monster species for the first time, they receive extra rewards. This means the more species of monsters they slay, the faster they level up. For them, this was a real opportunity. Bjorn stepped forward and smashed through the enemies, while those approaching from behind were easily taken down with arrows. With a reliable companion by his side, this all felt like child's play. As they continued defeating ghouls, they kept moving north, pushing forward until they reached the third day of their journey. Along the way, they spotted blood on the ground. Judging by its appearance, it definitely wasn't goblin blood. But then, whose blood could it be? Nearby, someone's foot had been almost severed, and a sandal had been left behind. This was the very spot where our boy had first set foot in the labyrinth. Right behind this location was the portal to the second floor. Recalling how close he had come to dying because of it, anger surged through him. In frustration, he slammed his hammer against the ground, cursing loudly. Erwin flinched in fear and instinctively began apologizing, assuming she had done something to upset him. But in reality, Bjorn was just frustrated with his own bad luck. If only he had arrived from a different direction, he would have already been on the second floor long ago. Meanwhile, Elf had tears in her eyes, convinced that everything was her fault. He reassured her not to worry, insisting that it wasn't her doing. That's when she finally understood the situation, and for the first time, sympathized with everything he had endured. Bjorn was surprised that she figured out on her own, but then she said something that left him baffled. She was sure his friends had gone to heaven. He had no idea what she meant by that. Finally, the moment had arrived to enter the portal to the second floor. A notification appeared, confirming that they had reached the goblin forest on the second floor. The very next moment, they suddenly plummeted down, crashing onto the ground. They had landed in the northern region of the goblin forest. Looking around, it seemed that there were no living beings within a 50 m radius. Erwin asked why she had never heard of a forest on the second floor before. In response, Bjorn explained that the first floor had 4 portals, one in the north leading to the goblin forest, another in the east leading to the beast slay zone, a third in the west opening to the land of the dead, and the last in the south leading to the Black Rocky Mountains. Among all these locations, the place they had landed in was the least dangerous. Bjorn then asked if she knew how to reach the city later, essentially how to get out of the dungeon. She explained that after a certain period, everyone would be automatically pulled out of the dungeon and transported to the city. Specifically, on the first floor, this happened after 168 hours, while on the second floor, it occurred after 240 hours. After that, they would be teleported straight to the city. Realizing this, our boy decided that when the 168-hour mark on the first floor approached, they would return and teleport out to avoid being spotted by the gang chasing them. For now, they planned to explore the area near the portal. As they moved forward, Erwin led the way, pointing out traps along the path. Our boy, however, saw nothing but leaves and stones until he threw a rock, revealing a hidden trap. She then asked how she had done, to which Bjorn simply replied that she had done her job well. After scouting for a while, they realized that no goblins were in the immediate area, so they continued exploring. The issue with the second floor was that goblins often moved in groups of 12. Worse, there were also mutant goblins, warriors, and archers, who were far more dangerous. Bjorn decided that they would clear the traps, expand their exploration area, and stay close to the portal in case they needed to make a quick escape. They followed this plan carefully, but soon Erwin felt another presence. This time, it was a group of goblins, more than 10 of them, at a distance of about 50 m. Bjorn then asked how close she could get without being detected. She estimated that without him, she could manage about 30 meters on her own. That made sense. After all, imagining Bjorn trying to hide in the bushes was almost laughable. He looked like a walking truck, whereas the elf girl could move silently without making a sound. Eventually, she spotted the goblins and signaled Bjorn. Loading an arrow, she took a powerful shot. This time, he couldn't even see if she had hit the target, but without hesitation, he stepped forward, telling her to stay behind. Walking straight toward the green creatures, he realized something surprising. Despite the overwhelming number of enemies, he wasn't afraid. Instead, his body seemed to react instinctively to the battle, as if craving it. His warrior's heart was twitching for a fight. With a mighty swing, he delivered a hammer strike so powerful that one goblin was nearly sent flying. He barely even noticed how quickly his adrenaline had surged. Raising his shield, he struck again, only to suddenly sense danger. A goblin had nearly sliced his face. If he had hesitated even a second longer, his head would have been gone. And of course, the goblins weren't giving him a moment to breathe. If he had been alone, he might have barely escaped, but he wasn't alone. Our favorite elf provided long-range support, allowing him to fight freely on the battlefield. After defeating the first group, Bjorn had earned 11 magic crystals. On the first floor, he had collected only 40 crystals throughout an entire day, so this was a significant improvement. Instead of giving her just 1 crystal, he handed her 2, because he decided to keep the goblin warrior's crystal for himself as it held more value. They continued their exploration, and as soon as they expanded their search radius to 3 kilometers, groups of goblins started appearing every 5 minutes. Among them were now stealth archers. Things were about to get even crazier. The goblins launched a full-force attack, and naturally, chaos ensued. Bjorn was holding his ground, but now he was in the goblin archer's line of sight. An arrow was about to strike him, but at the last moment he dodged. Now he had also pinpointed the archer's location. After nearly 15 hours of roaming and fighting, they finally decided to take a break. Bjorn told Erwin that she could sleep first. Of course, she had already borrowed a sleeping bag and blanket. Placing her weapons aside, she laid down to rest, perhaps feeling safer now that he was around. After hunting for over 15 hours, they had gathered plenty of rewards. As they expanded their exploration area, they encountered other groups, each consisting of more than 3 members, some even belonging to different species from another world. Though they merely passed by each other, our boy wasn't fond of seeing other people. To him, explorers were scarier than dungeon monsters, especially now that he had a reason to be cautious. On the 4th day, inside the dungeon, they continued fighting. They rested on the 5th day, and on the 6th, they encountered more people. Finally, the 7th day arrived. The day they were supposed to escape the labyrinth. The first floor would close in 2 hours and 47 minutes. Bjorn ordered that they head toward the portal to avoid being late. The elf warned him about newly placed traps. Perhaps the goblins were respawning. She also mentioned another goblin group about 70 m away. Without hesitation, Bjorn decided they would fight again. However, this time their enemies consisted of 8 normal goblins, 2 archers, and 2 warriors. A total of 12 goblins. Like a bulldozer, my guy tore through the goblins, swiftly eliminating the warriors, while Erwin focused on the archers. His strikes seemed even stronger than before, perhaps due to all the battles he had fought up to this point. Erwin was also showing progress. She now instinctively knew where and when to shoot, as if she had become completely sync with our boy. She had initially mentioned 2 archers, yet no arrows had come her way. Of course, Bjorn praised her, but also wanted confirmation. Had she taken both archers down, he needed to know so he wouldn't have to worry about incoming arrows. She remained silent, unsure if the second archer was truly dead. That in itself was a good thing. Uncertain information could sometimes be more dangerous than the enemy itself. Her cautiousness made him feel a sense of pride in her. Suddenly, she noticed something unusual dropping from the goblin archer. What they saw was none other than a goblin archer essence. Bjorn immediately recognized it as something extremely rare. He had researched it before. According to forum discussions, essences were part of the game skill system. Each essence provided 1 passive and 1 active skill, though their attributes weren't fixed. However, there was a limit to how many essences one could absorb, making it crucial to choose wisely for the future. Its drop rate was close to 0. Bjorn felt a pang of disappointment. There was no way his luck was good enough to get something like this. Curious, the elf asked whether absorbing an essence would turn a person into a goblin. Bjorn explained that it wouldn't. It would only grant them some of the goblin's abilities. He even gave an example of a man who had consumed a wolf monster essence on the 1st floor, allowing him to track others by scent. Since he already had a specific essence in mind for himself, he let Erwin keep this one. He couldn't just pick any random essence, as that could lead to problems later. However, he made her promise something before taking it, a conversation he had intended to have back on the 1st floor. Before he could finish speaking, a group of people arrived and ordered them not to move. One of them stepped forward and asked, "What are you doing here?" The elf began explaining that they were out hunting, but Bjorn quickly warned her that she didn't need to answer them. Without hesitation, he grabbed her by the shoulders and literally threw her into the essence. As soon as she made contact, she merged with it. The man who had been watching all this unfold became desperate and furious. He shouted that the essence belonged to them. When the elf returned, Bjorn immediately challenged them, daring them to come forward if they wanted to fight, and readied his hammer to crush them. Instead of engaging, the group turned and ran at full speed toward the portal. He forced them to retreat. The problem, however, was that based on Bjorn's analysis, they were likely heading to the portal to return to the city. That meant they could cross paths again, which was best avoided. Just then, the elf warned that a group of goblins was about 50 meters away. Bjorn suggested trying to avoid them, but that plan quickly fell apart. The goblins had already detected them. At the last moment, he made a split-second decision. They needed to head in the opposite direction. The elf confirmed the plan, but just as she did, an arrow came flying straight toward her face. Luckily, Bjorn reacted instantly, pulling her back with full force. But something was off. This arrow didn't seem to belong to the goblin archers. It was likely from the same group that had just run toward the portal. Bjorn suspected that those people had deliberately attracted the goblins toward them while positioning themselves on the other side, waiting in ambush. Realizing there was no way out, he told the Erwin to use her powers. They would have to fight. She hesitated for a moment, confused, but Bjorn quickly explained that these essences had unique abilities. The one she had absorbed earlier was from a goblin archer, meaning her power had significantly increased. She had gained both a passive and an active ability. Her passive ability was Poison Arrow, which inflicted poison damage whenever she used her bow. Her active ability was Thief Steps, which allowed her to enter stealth mode. Bjorn was impressed that she could activate it just by willing it without wasting time. He handed her the bag, deciding to take on the goblins alone while she focused on the human archer behind him. She clearly didn't like the plan, but Bjorn insisted they had no time to argue. He ordered her to hide and wait for his signal before shooting at the human archer. Bjorn charged toward the goblins, launching a fierce assault. With incredible speed, he defended and attacked simultaneously, taking on multiple goblins at once. As the archers resumed their attack, a brief moment of carelessness allowed a goblin to strike him from behind. Reacting instantly, he turned and eliminated the goblin in a single blow. However, without Erwin's support, dealing with the enemies ahead became more difficult. His injuries worsened, and fatigue started setting in. Just then, he sensed 2 incoming arrows, one from a goblin archer and another from a man holding a crossbow. Realizing it was impossible to block both, he made a last-moment decision to stylishly block the crossbow bolt. As a result, the goblin's poisoned arrow struck his elbow, causing his arm's movement to weaken. Now, he had to choose between a shield and hammer. Opting to keep the shield, he reasoned that it would allow him both to defend and attack, while also protecting himself from the humans. As always, he became completely furious, and the goblins, terrified, began to flee. He knew there was no need to chase them, especially when he had other opponents to deal with. At that moment, the humans stepped forward, acknowledging that he had handled the goblins alone, which was quite impressive. Bjorn, however, already knew these were the same people he had anticipated. When they insulted the elf, his rage exploded. Without hesitation, he challenged them to attack, pressuring them into a fight. But instead of engaging immediately, they attempted to blackmail him. Despite his strength, they pointed out that he was now injured. Offering him a deal, they said they would let him go if he revealed the elf's location. Hearing this, Bjorn simply smiled, prompting them to call him crazy for laughing in such a situation. Their leader, staying cautious, ordered his men not to lower their defenses, telling them to imagine they were hunting a giant monster. But now, with one of his arms rendered useless, it was time to send a signal, one that even people in this world would understand. Without hesitation, Bjorn lunged toward the leader and struck his sword with a shield in a violent thrust. The man immediately called for reinforcements. An old samurai launched a powerful slicing attack, but Bjorn retaliated with full force. The problem, however, was that he was now surrounded. As he considered whether Erwin had managed to defeat the crossbow wielder, an arrow suddenly came flying at full force. No one knew who had fired it. All that was clear was that it was heading straight toward Bjorn and the leader. The human's tank quickly shouted for his allies to focus on attacking the barbarian while he handled the arrows. While he defended, the other two attacked Bjorn from both sides. The leader struck his shield from the front, while the samurai moved in from behind. Making a quick decision, Bjorn sacrificed his useless arm, using it as a distraction to land a devastating blow on the leader's head. The man recoiled, calling him a monster. Meanwhile, Bjorn swiftly turned to dodge the samurai's next attack, creating some distance between them. Then, something unexpected happened. Another arrow came flying in. This time, the tank managed to block it. But unlike before, this arrow was engulfed in flames. The intense heat forced the tank to discard his shield, leaving him vulnerable. In the next scene, the leader takes another arrow to the shoulder. Realizing that staying any longer would only worsen the situation, he starts running and mutters that he'll deal with the elf later. Meanwhile, the samurai intensifies his attacks, striking faster and urging our boy to surrender. Bjorn regains some momentum, using his shield to block the view and extend his reach. He swings his shield at the samurai, who narrowly dodges, but the attack lands on the tank behind him, sending the man flying. He crashes to the ground, coughing up blood. The old samurai, now furious, wonders why such a strong warrior is even part of this group. The two engage in a fierce exchange of blows, but this time it's a fair one-on-one fight. Bjorn lifts his shield and hurls it straight at the old man's head, then grabs him by the collar and in a fit of rage, bites his neck. Bjorn remains standing firm while the other two opponents have already met their end. Suddenly, Erwin rushes toward our boy, calling him sir. She anxiously asks if he's okay and urges him to take a potion, showing genuine concern for him. After drinking it, Bjorn feels a strange sensation. His body feels like it's boiling, every vein pulsing, his skin burning and itching. After a moment, Erwin encourages him, assuring him that he can handle it. However, he is only concerned about the time. She informs him that it has been 10 minutes since he took the potion, reminding him that they have 40 minutes left before the first portal closes. Without hesitation, he tells her to take off clothes. Completely flustered, Erwin freezes, but then convinces herself that he must have a good reason for saying this. She hesitantly starts undressing, only for Bjorn to clarify. He wasn't telling her to take off her clothes, but to strip the bodies of the fallen enemies. Embarrassed, she quickly recovers and starts gathering only the useful items, leaving the unnecessary clothing behind. Without wasting time, she picks up a crossbow from one of the fallen men. With only 26 minutes left, they sprint as fast as they can. Finally, when just 8 minutes remain, the portal comes into view. As the countdown reaches 50 seconds, they dive through it as fast as possible. Bjorn crashes headfirst onto the ground on the other side, while Erwin lands gracefully. Frustrated by his rough landing, he groans. But Erwin, full of excitement, exclaims that the whole experience was so much fun. She thanks him for a job well done. He acknowledges her words, and she reminds him that he can now talk about the essence condition he had mentioned earlier. However, there isn't enough time to discuss it here, so they decide to talk about it after leaving. With only 8 seconds left, Bjorn struggles to remember the name of the tavern where they can meet later. His mind races, his head feeling like it's about to explode. Just as 4 seconds remain, the name finally comes to him. Blackwell. As soon as he utters the name, the labyrinth seals shut. The notification appeared confirming that he had been transported to Rafdonia, meaning he had finally returned to the city. Our boy was back, and it seemed like the others had also made it out. He hadn't expected so many people to return. No matter how much time one spent in the labyrinth once outside, it was always the next day at exactly noon, forcing them to readjust their clocks. Suddenly, a barbarian called out to him. Bjorn recognized him as Carrick. They exchanged greetings, and soon after, Senec arrived. Within moments, more barbarians gathered around, leaving Bjorn with the same reaction anyone would have. Where did all these barbarians suddenly come from? When he needed them inside the labyrinth, there was not a single one in sight. Before long, the group moved toward the store to count their collected crystals, betting on who had the most. Naturally, they invited Bjorn to join in on the wager. The woman in charge of counting announced that they had a total of 41,498 crystals, which left everyone impressed. Then it was Bjorn's turn. As the woman began counting rapidly, Bjorn found himself impressed. When she finally revealed the total, it was an astonishing 182,413 crystals. The crowd erupted in cheers, chanting his name as they lifted him onto their shoulders. He had set a new record. Time passed, and Bjorn wandered around with the other barbarians. That's when he spotted a familiar figure in the distance, his favorite elf. She was there, happily chatting with a group of elves, her cheerful demeanor standing out. A twinge of jealousy hit him. Why was she surrounded by all those guys? Meanwhile, he himself was stuck with a group of overly muscular men. When she noticed him, she waved slightly. He quietly indicated her to meet him at night. She confirmed with a nod, but before the moment could pass, another elf girl from her group turned to her and asked if she knew that barbarian. Caught off guard, Erwin quickly denied any acquaintance with him. At that moment, a large barbarian who had been eyeing the scene turned to Bjorn and asked if he had been looking at that elf. Bjorn casually denied it, but the man's expression darkened. With clear hostility, he declared that under no circumstances could the greatest warrior ever be on good terms with those cowardly, point-eared people. Hearing this, one of the elves visibly looked offended. Bjorn immediately sensed that things were taking a turn for the worse. A clash between the muscular warriors and the elegant, beautiful elves was just on the verge of breaking out. However, the tension eventually subsided. As he continued walking through the city, he saw families reuniting, brothers embracing, parents overjoyed, but not everyone had made it back. Some were still missing. It was a stark reminder of reality. Seeing it happen in real life was far different from watching it in a 2D game. But for now, it was time for celebration. The muscular warriors drank mug after mug of beer. Even the women were joining in. Some were even downing 2 at once. Bjorn couldn't help but wonder why he was here with them. Originally, he had only wanted to see if there was anything he could learn from the barbarians. But here, they were just drinking endlessly, drowning themselves in alcohol without a care in the world. Frustrated, he suddenly stood up and declared that he was leaving immediately. The moment he announced his departure, every barbarian in the bar turned to look at him. Some asked why he was leaving, but in the end, they simply wished him good luck, calling him the best barbarian warrior. After walking for some distance, he realized how peaceful the outside world was. Different races were even seen wandering together. He then headed to an inn, took a bath, and thought to himself, if things were this calm here, maybe living in this city wouldn't be so bad. After bathing, the massive barbarian lay on the bed wearing nothing but his underwear. He was so big that his legs dangled off the bed. The moment his head touched the pillow, memories of his old home resurfaced. When he woke up, it was already 9:18 at night. He had left the dungeon at noon, meaning he must have slept for around 4 to 5 hours. He inquired about a tavern only to be told that it had closed down. Apparently, the owner got caught up in a betting scheme 10 years ago, forcing them to change both the owner and the tavern's name. Curious about the new name, he was told it was now called Python, the very place he was standing in. It felt different from when he had last played. As he stepped into the bar, the lively atmosphere greeted him. Everything seemed normal until he spotted Erwin calling out to him. She was sitting with another grumpy elf. The woman immediately remarked, "So, you're the barbarian." However, he politely corrected her. "My name is Bjorn, and who are you?" She introduced herself as Erwin's older sister, Teresia. Then, suddenly standing up, she demanded to know why he called a young girl to a tavern so late at night. More importantly, why had he failed to show up after calling Erwin there himself? Without hesitation, she called him shameless. Completely confused, Bjorn asked what she meant. Teresia snapped, telling him to stop acting innocent. Panicking slightly, he turned to Erwin and asked how long it had been since they left the dungeon. Erwin casually replied, "Around 30 hours. Only then did it hit him. He wasn't feeling refreshed because he had slept for 4 to 5 hours. He had been asleep for 30 hours straight. Erwin, however, remained silent, simply observing the situation. He quickly apologized, explaining that he had been sleeping the whole time. This left Teresia completely stunned. She had never seen a barbarian apologize before, and she admitted that she hadn't expected much from him, considering she herself hadn't apologized to anyone in over 7 years. Still, she wanted to know what exactly was his business with Erwin in this place. Bjorn simply replied that he wasn't obligated to tell her anything. That response instantly made her furious, and the two began arguing in front of everyone. Suddenly, Teresia placed a bag on the table, stating that it contained 350,000 crystals, enough to compensate for the essence Erwin had consumed. She then glanced at him, wondering why he wasn't taking the money. Suspecting an ulterior motive, she even remarked that he was hiding something. Bjorn, ignoring her accusations, simply asked, "Does Erwin agree with her sister?" He then revealed the deal he had planned. He wanted Erwin to help him until he found his own essence. This revelation took Erwin by surprise. "Oh, so that's how it is?" she asked to further convince her. He even promised that this time they would split the loot 50-50. Hearing this, she was completely overjoyed, only to suddenly lose her excitement. With an apologetic expression, she admitted that she had already joined her sister's group. Teresia then firmly declared that she would never let Erwin again. The only reason it had happened before was because it was part of a ritual. Bjorn, as usual, was infuriated upon hearing this, but instead of arguing, she simply shoved the bag toward him and told him to take the crystals if he understood. However, Bjorn pointed out that 350,000 crystals would be about half the current price, right? She confirmed it, but he wasn't convinced. If that was the case, then 280,000 crystals were missing, as their promise split was 90-10. Laughing, Teresia admitted that she had almost forgotten and then literally picked up 280,000 crystals and placed them on the table. She had actually tried to deceive him. Now, he fully understood why barbarians and elves hated each other so much. Satisfied, he told her she could leave since he needed to speak with Erwin privately. Her sister seemed a bit confused by this, but before she could respond, Erwin suddenly grabbed her hand, thanked her for coming, and told her she could go now. She needed to thank and say goodbye to the barbarian. Her sister, impressed, felt that Erwin was finally growing up. However, before leaving, she turned toward the hour boy and made a demand. He had to swear an oath that he would not sleep with Erwin. If he swore, she would leave. Hearing this, Erwin turned completely red while Bjorn found himself wondering, was she only forbidding sleeping with her? Were the other options allowed? But Teresia kept pointing at him, insisting that he swear. Since he didn't care either way, he made the oath. And just like that, she finally left. As she was leaving, she thanked him for saving Erwin. The young elf turned crimson with embarrassment, but Bjorn remained unfazed. Once her sister was gone, Erwin hesitantly asked if she had been too rude to her. She had never said no to her sister before. Bjorn reassured her that it was fine. She then, for his previous offer, but admitted that she had already decided to work with her sister. Apologizing, she said she hoped he wouldn't mind. He simply replied, "It's fine." Without hesitation, she then pulled out a bag containing 63,000 crystals, explaining that it was part of the loot from the crossbow guy and the redhead. She had already taken her share. She also mentioned that she had left 2 backpacks at her home and suggested that he visit tomorrow to check what was inside. That was when he realized, without even being asked, she always understood his needs. Losing such a helpful companion would truly be unfortunate. Suddenly, she asked how she should repay him. She was serious about paying him back for saving her in the dungeon. Now, her sister's concerns made a lot more sense. Bjorn thought for a moment, but couldn't come up with anything. So, instead, he simply asked if she wanted to eat something. She shook her head, saying she wasn't hungry. In response, he casually said, "Then I'll just order for myself." For some reason, she blushed and suddenly had a brilliant idea. She decided she did want something to have her first post-dungeon drink, and she wanted to share it with him. The thought sparked a memory. This was a significant tradition in elven culture. She then assumed that of course this wouldn't be his first post-dungeon drink. However, before she could finish her sentence, Bjorn interrupted, asking what she meant. This was actually his first time too. She was shocked. Wait, you weren't joking. Not only that, this was also his first time even going into a dungeon. Finally, their food arrived. Erwin complimented him on how well he had performed in the dungeon, and he returned the compliment. They raised their drinks in a toast, and after a while, their conversation drifted into silly topics, like how she was wearing a skirt today while he was in a t-shirt. He kept drinking one mug after another, impressing her. Then, out of nowhere, he declared that he had figured out a way for her to repay him. She was curious. "And what is that?" she asked with a bit of pompousness. But instead of answering directly, he said they needed to go somewhere else. Otherwise, the security guard would come after them. She blushed and mischievously asked, "Could we do it in my room?" A little while later, he was completely out of breath, drenched in sweat. She too was gasping for air, tears welling up as she exclaimed, "I can't take it anymore." She had known this barbarian was a scoundrel, but in reality, our boy was just giving her a chiropractic session, since he didn't fully control his strength. He had nearly pulled her arm out of its socket. Tearing up, she cried, "I really can't take it anymore." When it was finally over, she thought about how close he had come to breaking her arm, but all he had really been doing was testing her flexibility. Furious, she demanded, "Wait, did you bring me here just to test my flexibility?" Unapologetically, Bjorn confirmed that yes, that was exactly what he had done. He simply wanted to check, since ability usage was prohibited within the city. Disappointed, she sighed as he started rambling on about game statistics and theories. After a while, she finally pulled him back to reality, complaining that she was getting sleepy, and just as expected, they ended up sleeping together, but only sleeping. Well, so much for that barbarian's so-called honor. The next day, Bjorn showed Erwin the loot he had brought back from the dungeon. She asked if he planned to sell everything since she needed leather armor and a belt. Bjorn allowed her to keep those items, stating that their cost would be deducted from her share. After that, they went around the city selling various items in different shops. Bjorn managed to earn a total of 1.4 million crystals, while Erwin was shocked to find that even she made 50,000 crystals. Bjorn mentioned that when he had first started the game, he had never earned this much. Then he brought up the idea of parting ways, which upset Erwin. She requested that he at least accompany her to the central square. Upon reaching the square, they found a crowd gathered. Curious, Erwin asked what was happening. Looking at a soldier, Bjorn explained that it was an execution. A man had been gagged and placed on the guillotine. He further clarified that these people hadn't committed any serious crimes. They had simply failed to pay their taxes. Witch's curse loomed over the city, and resources were only available through the labyrinth. Those who refused to participate in the labyrinth were executed to reduce the number of mouths to feed. As the execution took place, people rushed toward the guillotine, dipping their bread in the executed man's blood and eating it. Erwin was disgusted by the sight. Bjorn explained that according to legend, drinking the blood of an executed person brought wealth. Bjorn noted that with each passing year, the fees kept rising, which meant he had to grow stronger over time. He realized that if he couldn't return to his world or become strong enough, he might end up on the guillotine himself. If he wanted to avoid that fate, he had to reach at least the 6th floor of the labyrinth. With that in mind, Bjorn headed to a library. In the game, this place had still been under construction, but now it was complete. As he stepped inside, he noticed people staring at him. His gaze then landed on a table where Einar was sleeping with her face buried in a book, even drooling slightly. Bjorn tried to wake her up. In her drowsiness, she smiled faintly at him, but the moment she fully woke up, she loudly greeted him, causing annoyance among the other visitors. Bjorn asked her to lower her voice and question what she was doing in the library. Einar explained that she was following his advice to think before acting, so she had decided to gather knowledge, hoping to set herself apart from other barbarians. She had also realized that there were enemies beyond just monsters, but studying was still difficult for her. Standing up, Einar mentioned that she was heading to the sanctuary to learn to read and write from the elders. Before leaving, she reminded Bjorn that she had promised to repay the favor of his advice. She assured him that if he ever needed help, he could find her at the Brave Bull Inn and she would assist him. Bjorn thanked her, hoping she wouldn't forget her promise because he had a feeling he would need her help soon. Bjorn sat in the library wondering how to find the book he needed. As he scanned a room, he noticed someone slumped over a large table, fast asleep. Approaching quietly, he let out a small cough, stirring the librarian from her sleep. She blinked at him and asked what he needed. Just as Bjorn was about to say the book's name, she stopped him. With a wave of her hand, she cast a spell. Bjorn tensed for a moment, wondering if she had just cast magic on him, but nothing seemed to have changed. The librarian simply told him to take a walk. He would find what he was looking for. Before he could say anything, she had already dozed off again. As he wandered through the library, he gradually understood how her spell worked. The books related to his thoughts began glowing on the shelves. Curious, he picked one up and started reading. According to the book, no one could live in these lands due to a witch's curse. The last remaining fortress, Rafdonia, had prevented a great disaster, leading the royal family to create a pathway to an alternate dimension to ensure people wouldn't starve. This pathway was known as the labyrinth. Bjorn found the story eerily similar to the beginning of the game. Another book he picked up mentioned magical crystals that could be transformed into bread and water. The third book detailed the war between elves and barbarians, but it was the fourth book that caught his attention. It spoke of evil spirits that came from another dimension and possessed human bodies. While there was no clear explanation for why this happened, the royal family had been trying to stop it for a long time. Bjorn realized that as long as he didn't say anything suspicious, no one could accuse him of anything. The fifth book he read described the death of a mortal king, stating that he had died 150 years ago. However, in the game, the king had only recently passed away. Another book discussed the instability of dimensions, and Bjorn immediately thought about the blonde guy he had met earlier. He must have read this book. The book also included a theory suggesting that if a portal was about to close, entering it at that moment could affect its stability. As he processed all this information, he felt a wave of unease. Deciding he had learned enough for now, he left the library and returned to the inn. Lying on his bed, he thought about when the labyrinth would open again, and concluded that he would need a partner. The next morning, a knock on his door woke him up. Thinking it might be Erwin, he opened the door only to be struck by a magic spell the moment he did. Erwin cheered, celebrating that after 10 tries, she had finally succeeded in forming a contract with spirit stones. In her hands, she held a swirling entity, most likely a wind spirit. According to her, it worked well alongside fire magic. Bjorn acknowledged her luck, knowing that the chances of forming a contract with spirit stones were only 10%, and the process was quite expensive. He asked her to undo the spell, which made her upset since she had wanted to show him something else. However, from Bjorn's perspective, she had already destroyed enough of his room. Realizing the mess she had made, Erwin quickly apologized and promised to clean everything doubling up. After a while, Bjorn complimented her on successfully forming the contract, but also advised her to use her time wisely instead of wasting it. Though Erwin agreed, she was still a bit disappointed that he hadn't shown more excitement about her spirit. Bjorn couldn't shake the feeling that Erwin had become more attached to him, perhaps because he was her first companion. However, he believed she only saw him as a friend. He told her that he intended to stay in town and that if she ever needed anything, she could come find him. Hearing this, Erwin blushed and smiled at him, though it seemed she had misunderstood his words in some way. Later, Bjorn made his way to an inn where the barbarians usually stayed. The moment he arrived, one of them recognized him. Barely having set foot inside, he was already overwhelmed by the noise. One of the barbarians approached him and asked if he planned to stay there for the night, boasting that it only cost 300 crystals per night, perhaps because the barbarians literally piled on top of each other to sleep. Bjorn dismissed the offer, stating that he had only come to speak with Einar. Before he could even finish a sentence, Einar appeared in the hallway. Upon seeing him, Einar immediately asked why he was there. Bjorn requested a favor. He wanted her to spar with her. Logically, he could have just gone to the training field where many barbarians are already fighting and practicing, but he specifically wanted to train with her. Since Einar still owed him a debt, she agreed, saying she would fight him any time. Without hesitation, Bjorn declared that he wanted to fight now. Both prepared themselves for battle, and as soon as the match began, Bjorn charged toward her, determined not to lose. However, Einar swiftly lifted her sword and defeated him in a single strike. Looking down at him, she asked if he was okay, but Bjorn, unfazed, requested another match. He knew she was truly strong. The two fought multiple times, and by the end, Bjorn was on his knees, exhausted. Einar too had grown tired, and they both decided to take a break. Bjorn then asked if she planned to return to the labyrinth alone. Einar confirmed that she would, as she didn't have enough money to form a party. Hearing this, Bjorn invited her to join him as his companion. Einar seemed slightly surprised at the offer. When he explained that he would take 80% of the profit, but would also cover all the expenses, she didn't ask for further details. Bjorn worried that she might reject the deal, but instead, she took his hand and agreed. From her perspective, there was no point in overthinking things. She wouldn't understand the details anyway, so she decided to trust him. The next day, Bjorn and his new companion arrived at the barbarian sanctuary, where the elder asked if he had come to learn reading and writing. However, Bjorn clarified that he was searching for a spiritual seal, specifically the immortal seal, as he would need it to pass through the labyrinth. According to the elder, elves could form contracts with spirits and use their powers. Dwarves possessed the blessing of steel, which enhanced the power of their items, and demi-humans could bond with ancestral beasts. Meanwhile, barbarians had access to spiritual seals. Curious, the elder asked how Bjorn knew about the seals, since someone his age wouldn't typically have such knowledge. Bjorn explained that he had learned about them from a book, and also mentioned that the seals had been used during the war against the elves. The elder laughed, patted Bjorn's shoulder, and said he had no reason to refuse his request. Just as Bjorn was about to say something, the elder demanded 800,000 crystals for the seal. Bjorn had anticipated this, and confidently agreed to pay. He had already learned during the game that seals were expensive. He offered 500,000 crystals and 3 special coins worth 100,000 each. Suspicious, the elder questioned how Bjorn had managed to gather such a large amount. Expecting this, Bjorn explained that he had found a wounded elf on the first floor, whom he had enslaved in exchange for an essence. He had even taken money from the elf's sister, which, while not entirely true, wasn't a complete lie either. The elder burst into laughter, and soon the other barbarians joined in celebrating Bjorn's achievement. As a reward, the elder gifted him 2 additional coins worth 100,000 each. Bjorn was so excited about this easy profit that he even declared he would continue mistreating elves in the future. Bjorn understood that the seal was a type of enhancement technique that allowed the body to absorb the essence of magical ingredients and develop special abilities. Barbarians tattooed their children because their souls were pure, and this practice kept their soul's path visible even as they grew. Before granting the seal, the wizard warned Bjorn that it could not be reversed. According to Bjorn, the essence of the seal belonged to a tank. The wizard then approached with a needle ready to begin. Repeatedly, the needle pierced Bjorn's back, and judging by his expressions, the process was incredibly painful. Eventually, he managed to activate the first level of the seal, which significantly boosted his natural regeneration, and granted him an additional 13 physical points. Bjorn thanked the wizard and with a sore back stepped out of the hut. The wizard chuckled. This was the first time a barbarian had ever thanked him. Bjorn hurried away, wondering if he had said something odd. As the sun rose, he headed into town to purchase equipment. He had already realized that he was much better at using shields than swords. At a shop, the vendor showed him weapons typically favored by barbarians, but none of them matched what he was looking for, until he found a mace that seemed perfect. With this new weapon, his item level increased by 85. He also bought a customized helmet and half-plate armor, which added 47 and 57 item levels, respectively. Outside the labyrinth, Bjorn had established a daily routine. He had breakfast with Erwin, spent his afternoons in the library, and dined at different places each evening to gather information, even if the food wasn't always great. In the late afternoon, he trained with the other barbarians, relying solely on his instincts. This training significantly improved his skills, allowing him to defeat Einar multiple times, even giving her combat tips. After training, Bjorn returned home, where Erwin requested to join him for dinner. After their meal, she bid him goodbye and wished him luck for the labyrinth, which was set to open the next day. Now, Bjorn's attributes are better. As soon as morning arrived, Bjorn and Einar requested unity magic. The attendant explained that all they needed to do was place their hands on a crystal. However, since nothing in this world came for free, the cost was 15,000 crystals, but in return, it granted them the ability to enter the labyrinth together. She further informed them that the higher the rank, the more expensive the magic would be, and it would only remain valid for 24 hours. A while earlier, inside a tavern, Einar had been left speechless in front of a lavishly set table. Before entering the labyrinth, Bjorn had ordered the best dishes available. The moment she tasted the food, she was overwhelmed, on the verge of tears because it was so delicious. The meal filled her with excitement and determination to work hard. Minutes before the portal was set to open, both of them were already waiting. Bjorn listened to the loud chatter around him and turned to see a few young barbarians fresh out of their coming-of-age ceremony, preparing to enter the portal. Einar watched them with a nostalgic expression, as if it had been ages since she had stepped into a portal herself. Finally, the portal opened, but before stepping in, Bjorn asked Einar to wait a little. He wanted to test a theory. She agreed without question and followed him. However, as soon as there was only a minute left before the portal would close, panic set in. Bjorn kept observing the portal's size until the nearby people started yelling that it was about to shut. Without wasting another second, both of them sprinted toward it. As soon as they entered the dark region, Bjorn followed through with his plan and lit a torch. Einar immediately pointed out something that caught her attention: a monument. Just as Bjorn had expected, this monument had the ability to take them directly to the second floor. The moment he touched it, light began to emanate from it, and a portal to the next floor appeared before them. Einar, still struggling to grasp what was happening, watched as Bjorn readied himself to step through the portal. The act of opening the first portal rewarded him with 2 experience points, causing his level to increase and his essence capacity to expand. Curious, Einar questioned how he had managed to take them straight to the next level. According to him, he had simply read about it in a book. If that was the case, then it seemed like they had entered the land of the dead. Bjorn turned to Einar and asked if she felt anything strange. She admitted that she sensed something filling her body. Trying to make sense of it, she explained that it was probably her spirit status adjusting. Bjorn connected the dots. It was similar to how leveling up worked in games. Just as characters gained higher stats upon leveling up, his soul power, or MP, had also increased. This was essential for using special abilities, and at the same time it determined how much essence he could absorb. Einar, however, found it odd that his level had increased without having defeated a single monster. What had happened was that normally only a small amount of experience could be obtained from undead monsters, but if someone was the first to open a portal, they could gain experience points, an easy way to level up. Bjorn had no intention of revealing this trick to anyone. In fact, he even warned Einar not to tell anyone that they had reached the second level so quickly. Experienced explorers would soon arrive, and if they were spotted, they would surely be questioned about how they had gotten there. Staying away from the portal seemed like the safest option. Securing the torch to his helmet for better visibility, Bjorn noted that the flame was magical. It neither extinguished nor emitted heat. Compared to the goblin-infested forests, the land of the dead had stronger monsters, but at least it wasn't riddled with traps, making it a more favorable place for barbarians. Just then, Einar sensed something approaching. It was a small group of ghouls. Despite this, she felt an exhilarating excitement at the thought of battle. Without hesitation, she charged toward them and swiftly took them down. It almost seemed too easy until a chilling scream echoed through the air. In that instant, fear crept into her. Bjorn calmly explained that it was likely a banshee and that it was best to leave it alone. The creature wouldn't attack unless provoked. However, Einar, still nervous, asked if it wasn't a dangerous monster. According to Bjorn, if they attacked first, they would be cursed. Moreover, the banshee would follow them until the very end of the labyrinth. That thought alone sent a shiver down Einar's spine. Another eerie scream rang out, and this time Einar instinctively clung to Bjorn's neck. Moments later, skeletons began emerging, confirming her fears. Bjorn tried to explain their weak points, but before he could finish, Einar, without even listening, eliminated all of them in an instant. The two continued heading north, walking for almost 8 hours. Along the way, they encountered ghouls and mutant skeletons wielding weapons, but defeating them wasn't too difficult. These battles helped Bjorn improve his skills as he crushed the monsters with his mace. His new armor significantly boosted his defense, and his helmet was no longer just for carrying candles. It could now withstand arrows as well. Glancing at Einar, he noticed that she was quite skilled in combat. One thing stood out though. She constantly shouted, "Vahela," the name of the ancestral goddess of the barbarians. Even she didn't seem to know why, but somehow Bjorn found himself doing the same, shouting along with her as they fought, enjoying the thrill of battle together. The continuous fights also granted him a significant amount of EXP points, Einar soon noticed that Bjorn's arm was injured, but he didn't seem concerned. To her surprise, his wound began healing on its own. Excited, she asked if it was due to the seal. Bjorn revealed that the first level of the seal enhanced regeneration and increased vigor. As they continued forward, they realized the terrain had changed, and the wails of the banshee had grown even louder. This signaled the arrival of rank 8 monsters. Suddenly, a guttural scream echoed through the area as a death demon appeared. It was said that this creature consumed the very light of the labyrinth. Bjorn reminded that the best strategy was to attack its head, and without hesitation, they launched their assault. However, the creature was no easy opponent. It blocked their attacks effortlessly, its skin as hard as stone. Bjorn took the lead, drawing the monster's attention while Einar attempted a sneak attack from behind. Yet, despite her precise strike, her blade barely penetrated. The demon turned and threw Einar aside. She got back on her feet, leaning on her sword, and shouted that the monster was far too strong. Bjorn recalled that even in the game, this monster had incredibly high defense and exceptional healing abilities. The death demon let out another roar, and this time, even Bjorn felt a chill. He knew exactly what that meant. The creature had activated its ability to summon ghouls. Within moments, 15 to 20 ghouls appeared, rushing toward the barbarians. Bjorn shouted for Einar to handle the ghouls while he focused on the demon. Gripping his shield tightly, he advanced, but the demon's attack forced him to retreat. Regaining his footing, he charged again, using his shield to block, while Einar swiftly eliminated the ghouls. Once she was done, he warned her not to get distracted before striking the monster with his mace once more. Now, both barbarians attacked in unison, finally managing to land a solid hit on the demon's head. For a moment, Bjorn thought their attack had worked, but the demon refused to go down. With a powerful strike, it sent Bjorn flying. He hit the ground hard, injured, and looked up just in time to see the wound on the monster's head almost fully healed. Bjorn analyzed the situation, trying to think of a strategy. Meanwhile, Einar grabbed the demon's leg with all her strength, attempting to unbalance it. She succeeded. The creature toppled backward. Seizing the opportunity, the barbarian struck, finishing it off before it could recover. The demon left behind a large magical crystal, but by barbarian standards, it was only worth about 100 crystals. If combined with the ghoul's remains, it would total around 300. Even though the risk was high, the reward felt small. Despite that, Einar was thrilled about hunting monsters. Bjorn, on the other hand, started thinking that hunting with her wasn't so bad. After all, Erwin had been a bit too passive. They continued battling death demons using the same tactic, knocking them off balance and delivering a decisive blow to the head. Eventually, they managed to defeat around 70 of them. Bjorn, who was searching for demon essence to synchronize with his seal, found nothing on the first day. By the second day, demons began appearing in pairs, but they still weren't too difficult to handle. The real trouble came when they took too long in one place. Soon, they found themselves at risk of being surrounded by ghouls. By noon, demons started appearing in groups of 3. That's when the barbarians realized the situation was becoming overwhelming. Just then, another group of explorers arrived. Before Bjorn could say anything, Einar interrupted and threatened them. Terrified, the explorers fled from the barbarians without a second thought. She then turned to Bjorn and said it would be better to set up camp elsewhere since humans had discovered their location and they couldn't be trusted. As they continued on their way, Bjorn wondered if she had bad experiences with humans in the past. As they were discussing how they hadn't found a good camping spot, a desperate voice calling for help reached their ears. Moving forward cautiously, they came across several adventurers' bodies, all showing traces of poison. Both of them froze. Before they could react further, a plunderer appeared in front of them, someone who looked incredibly powerful. Unlike regular explorers, plunderers didn't hunt monsters, but instead targeted fellow adventurers to make money. This activity was punishable by death, but just as Bjorn had silenced the explorers who had abused him, if everyone here was eliminated, no one outside would ever know. The plunderer smirked and asked if this was their first time encountering someone like her. Bjorn remained silent, carefully analyzing his opponent. Judging by her stance and characteristics, she was highly skilled at her craft, so much so that he had never even heard of her before. Meanwhile, Einar was already on edge, her hand inching toward her sword. She whispered to Bjorn, saying she had a feeling this one was extremely strong. Looking at the fallen explorers, it was clear that none of them had external injuries. It seemed they had all been poisoned. Bjorn turned to the plunderer and asked if those people had been her companions. Turning her back to them, she casually admitted that they had been. Without a hint of remorse, she began gathering their belongings into a magic pouch. Uncertain about their next move, Einar hesitated and asked Bjorn if they should fight. However, after assessing her strength, Bjorn made the quick decision that running away was their best option. Before the plunderer could react, both of them bolted at full speed. As they ran, Bjorn began spotting the signs he had left behind earlier, markers to guide him back to the first floor. But before they could make much progress, they suddenly ran into a group of 4 human explorers, forcing them to stop abruptly. Einar, already prepared for battle, tensed up, but Bjorn quickly explained that they were running away and needed help. The group seemed to believe them, and their leader made an offer. If they could defeat the plunderer, they would receive the full reward. Calling them closer, the leader prepared to use his gnome ability, which could cloak them and their companions within a 3 meters radius, provided they remained still. Trusting him, Bjorn and Einar stepped forward. Lucky us, their leader mused. 2 barbarians just walked straight into our trap. A sudden wave of paralysis spread through Bjorn's body, and he finally understood. The plunderers had set them up. He had no idea how to break free from their magic. His mind raced, analyzing the effect. If they were truly immobilized, what kind of magic could this be? Then it hit him. It had to be the immobilization spell of a stone golem. That meant one thing. The person who cast this must have consumed the essence of such a creature, and the only way to break free was to take damage. As the plunderers casually discussed how much they could make from the barbarians, one of them grabbed Einar's face. Examining her closely with a wicked grin, he remarked how fortunate they were. After all, a barbarian's heart was incredibly valuable. Another plunderer turned to Bjorn, chuckling as he pulled out a knife. Too bad for you, he sneered. My eyes won't let you escape. With that, he drove a knife toward Bjorn's neck. However, Bjorn was ready. Just as the blade pierced his skin, he twisted his body, ensuring the wound was as shallow as possible. The pain was enough to break the paralysis. In an instant, he moved. Before anyone could react, he struck the plunderer directly in the face. The group gasped in shock. Bjorn, breathing heavily, yanked the knife from his neck and flung it aside. It landed dangerously close to Einar's chest. Though still in a combat stance, he was severely injured and his body could barely hold up. His legs buckled, and he collapsed onto his knees. But Einar wasted no time. Gripping her sword tightly, she lunged forward, slicing through the plunderers with swift, merciless strikes. One by one, they fell until only the leader remained. Seeing his entire group wiped out, he turned and fled. Einar barely spared him a glance. Instead, she rushed to Bjorn, who was in critical condition. Desperation filled her voice as she shouted at him to stay alive. Clutching her sword, she swore vengeance while Bjorn, barely conscious, weakly reached out, struggling to ask for a potion. Bjorn's near-death experience resulted in an increase of 3 points in his mentality. After taking a potion and with the help of the seal, his neck wound healed quickly. Einar congratulated him, joking that he was now the only barbarian with a scar on his neck. Now fully recovered, Bjorn wanted to track down the leader of the plunderers, and soon they managed to capture him. However, instead of killing him, Bjorn intended to use his ability to hide from the plunderer woman. Just then, a dart shot through the air and struck the captured plunderer directly in the neck. Both of them turned to see his lifeless body while the redhead plunderer approached. She revealed that she had been watching their fight with his group. Bjorn immediately shouted to Einar that it was time to attack, and both of them rushed toward the woman. However, despite being attacked by 2 barbarians at once, she remained eerily calm. She easily dodged Einar's strike, and even managed to block Bjorn's attack. Bjorn couldn't help but wonder how many essences she possessed. She was incredibly strong. Deciding to change tactics, he dropped his weapon and attempted to push her while shouting at Einar to attack. But suddenly, he collapsed to his knees, realizing too late that the plunderer had stabbed him with a dagger. A chilling thought crossed his mind. If she was an aura user, they had no chance. Meanwhile, Einar attempted a surprise attack from behind, but the plunderer retaliated with such speed that Einar couldn't even defend herself. She was using a paralyzing poison, leaving the barbarians immobilized. Bjorn recognized how powerful she was, far beyond what they could handle. As she pointed her dagger at his face, she unexpectedly offered him a deal. If he swore that he had never seen her, she would spare his life. She explained that she had never intended to kill the barbarians in the first place because she owed a debt to their race. Bjorn realized she was telling the truth. However, Einar warned him not to trust her, believing she was merely toying with them. Curious, Bjorn asked what would happen if he refused the offer. Without hesitation, the plunderer stated that she would kill him. Left with no choice, Bjorn swore on his honor. The plunderer, intrigued by his response, remarked that he was different from other barbarians and placed some kind of enhancement on him. It was now Einar's turn to respond. To Bjorn's surprise, she refused. The plunderer raised her dagger, ready to finish Einar off. Desperately, Bjorn urged Einar to swear the oath. Einar tried to argue about the honor of barbarians, but Bjorn reminded her that she had promised to trust him. Still hesitant, she eventually gave in. Before leaving, Bjorn asked the plunderer which floor she had come from. She answered the 8th floor. That meant the barbarians had survived purely because of her promise. As she disappeared, Bjorn made a silent vow. Next time, their encounter wouldn't end like this. Returning to the 1st floor, they stepped out of the portal. The moment they did, Einar collapsed onto the ground. Bjorn asked if she was okay, to which she weakly replied that she was no longer a warrior. Bjorn simply stated that only the strong survived. There would be another chance in the future. Einar tried to come to terms with this, knowing that one day they would get their revenge. They took a break to rest, but despite his exhaustion, Bjorn couldn't sleep. He wasn't feeling as terrible as but humiliation weighed heavily on him, just like when that blonde guy had saved him. The priestess had refused to heal him, and the swordsman had handed him a potion which he had drunk like a helpless fool. Bjorn remembered everything. The moment he had seen someone decapitated, the madness he had witnessed since entering this world. All he had done was try to survive, but now he was determined. He didn't want to live his life like this anymore. He asked Einar if she was willing to do whatever it took to become stronger, even if it was dangerous. Without hesitation, she agreed. She knew that if they didn't grow stronger, they would die. Bjorn then began explaining his plan to his companion. They would enter the rift and search for the case. But first, they defeated different monsters on the first floor, eventually reaching a dark area. After some time, they arrived at a stone monument. Bjorn explained that it was a memorial for those who had discovered the labyrinth. A quote was engraved on it, one that he had seen in the game. This meant that the hidden condition should be the same as well. The rift would be opened, but it was a secret. Einar promised not to tell anyone, but she was curious what exactly was the rift. Bjorn explained that it was another labyrinth within the labyrinth. To open the rift on the first floor, they needed magic crystals from the 4 types of monsters. From the second floor, they required an 8th rank magic crystal. The rift itself would open an instance dungeon with a 5-person capacity, and its difficulty depended on the number of participants. In the game, the rift had only opened 3 months in a Rift City's timeline, and people had eventually found ways to force it open. Bjorn activated it, and the 2 of them stepped inside.